what practices or strategies, I guess, have you seen that work well in making professional development a priority, but a priority that also doesn't take away from the day-to-day operations of a school?
Everything should be data-driven. Educational or our best guesses, we're going to have some sense of that. But really, we need to be guided by facts. We need to be guided by trends. We need to be guided by the data.
Hello, and welcome into this week's episode of Campus Conversations, brought to you by the Alabama Independent School Association. I'm your host, Michael Shipma, as we continue to dive into topics and issues pertaining to independent education, but especially here in the state of Alabama. As of the recording of this episode in March of 2025, the current school year is rapidly coming to a close. Still a lot of work left to be done before May, though. But that means summer, and as we know, is coming up right around the corner. And summer is where probably some of the most impactful work can be done as it pertains to teachers and school leadership as they look ahead to the next school year, how things will go. But in this ever-evolving educational landscape, which we've talked about on this podcast from a lot of different angles, it can be hard to keep up with what's going on and how to make the best decisions on a school-by-school basis and figuring out what's going to work best for your school community. So joining us now to talk about all of this, some of the challenges that schools may face, maybe some of the opportunities that present themselves, is Roy Alexander. He's a senior consultant at Lighthouse Counsel, has over 20 years of experience in both the education and business sector. So Roy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast this week and talking to us about all of this.
And thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking a little bit a moment ago. I'm very excited to kind of pick your brain about what you specifically and also Lighthouse Counsel as well see in the educational landscape, specifically for independent schools, and some of the challenges that they're facing right now. I think there's a lot of insight to be gained from what you guys have to offer. But before we dive into all of that, I want if you would please to kind of give us a kind of a 30,000 foot overview of what Lighthouse Counsel does and then what your work is specifically in that organization as it pertains to independent schools and some other organizations as well.
Sure. We obviously do focus independent schools and higher ed, colleges, universities, but more so we really do nonprofits, whether it's staff development, strategic planning, campaigns. We work with places, YMCA, Gospel Music Association, Building Museum. So kind of all over the range. Our specialty obviously has been in the independent schools and higher ed. But within Lighthouse Counsel, a lot of the things we do revolve around strategic development, board development, organizational analysis and planning, campaign counsel, and of course, campaign feasibility and planning studies. So, those are broad topics, obviously, but they kind of hone in on basically making sure that the organization is moving in the direction that it needs to. And, from being on the outside looking in, you can glean a lot of information and give a lot of insight that sometimes when you're on the inside, it's a little bit difficult to do. And we all need roadmaps. We all need to know where we're going, how we're going to get there, and what it's going to take to get there. And these days, years ago, it used to be strategic planning, probably every 5 years. The world is changing so rapidly. It's almost every 3 years, even more so, sometimes 2 years and so forth, because things are just evolving so quickly. So that's kind of what we do, and in a general overview for you.
I know. And like you said, Lighthouse, and then you also specifically, you've kind of worked in both the education and the business side of things. And you're right, that is something that we've heard a lot from our member schools is just things are changing so fast. I mean, really and truly, that has to weigh on a lot of leaders, no matter what it is that you're doing, the amount of work and time it takes to do these and have these very in-depth conversations about what the future holds. What are you hearing from some of the people that you work with about these challenges and just how difficult this whole process can be and having to do it so frequently?
Well, one of the challenges that you have really, and kind of we'll focus a little bit on the independent schools since, with your organization, of course, and what we do. But a lot of things that we schools struggle with, in particular, the head of schools and so forth, is really kind of in board development, but also separating the roles of the head of school and the board. And by that, I mean, it's easy when you're in the day-to-day operations, it's easy to get kind of hung up on what's for lunch, or the lunches aren't being prepared properly or something.
Uh-huh.
From a board's perspective, we really don't want them to do that because that's not their role. Their role is governing and strategic planning and so forth. So, one of the challenges that we have is maintaining the correct leadership roles and make sure that that everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing. When the board is focused on the future of the organization, then we can be looking at more so what are some of the issues and potential opportunities that are coming to the organization or coming to the school. The head of school, for example, yeah, they're involved in the day-to-day operations, and that is their focus. But at the same time, they need to be very strong leaders because somebody is going to be the leader in the organization. And it should be the head of school. And of course, it should be in conjunction with the board chair. Not always does that happen, but it kind of revolves around that and starts with that because everything kind of trickles down from then on. If you have strong leadership, then the organization will be focused on some of the bigger picture items that need to be addressed. For example, hiring of qualified teachers. It's getting to be a real struggle with finding not only qualified teachers, but of course, you're competing with salaries and so forth in the public sector compared to the private sector. Not always can they match it. There's a lot of benefits for a teacher to be in the private school, a lot of autonomy. But at the same time, you've got to be feeding your family, you got to look at retirements. And so, all of those things play into budgets and so forth there. So, it's all that. And that's just one thing, of course. But a lot of the challenges come from really at the board level and with the head of school, making sure that the organization is on the right track. And just some of the things I'll hit real briefly, and then we can discuss them. The enrollment dynamics, things are changing rapidly especially with babies. We have a declining population that is really going to be affecting enrollment in the next 5, 10, 15 years. Got to be looking at that. Financial sustainability. That's been one of the bigger roles that I've had over the years in consulting and with the schools, because I've been called into schools many, many times. And during the 2008 crisis, financial crisis, and of course during COVID, everything changed. And so the financial sustainability of the schools was high on the list because you had a lot of schools that were unfortunately going to be closing, or everything changes. And so I would go in, and with my business and background, I spent really over 4 decades leading for-profit organizations, multi-million-dollar corporations, CEO and president. And then I spent about 25 years in the education field as a head of school, interim head of school, development director. But because of my business background, it was heavily focused on finances. And in the schools, they didn't have so much the financial background, and the leadership did not, but more the education. And as things have shifted over the years, it's had to be more of a focus on the financial aspect to make sure that the organization is sustainable. So that's a couple of the things. Other areas I'll just briefly touch on, and then we can go back. Things are changing in the federal and state as far as legislative and policy changes going on. Technology, AI is here, and it's wonderful. But how do we how do we implement that and put it into the curricula, but make sure that it's not being abused, plagiarism, so forth there. So there's a challenge there. I mentioned briefly workforce challenges going on, community engagement. And that's one of the biggest things. Everything that we do is relationship building, whether it's with the board level, the faculty, staff, its constituents, it's all of the stakeholders. It is really community engagement. Those just briefly are some of the topics, the challenges that are going on, and then each one we can dive in a little bit more as you would like, and see with questions that you're getting in, and how we can help address those, and kind of give a little bit of an insight into what others are doing and what's been successful.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that because one of the great things that kind of got me looking at having you guys in Lighthouse Counsel on our podcast to kind of talk about some of these things was a really interesting, a brief but very interesting and insightful video posted by Lighthouse Counsel senior consultant Beth Sanders, who kind of outlined some of those things, those challenges that you just mentioned. I'll quickly run through them because there are 8 of them. Enrollment dynamics, financial sustainability, as you said, legislative and policy changes, technological integration, workforce challenges, professional development, community engagement, head of school and board relationships. And so those are all really critical things that I feel like can really, everybody would agree that those things are challenges. But then, of course, the best way to address those challenges is where maybe we start to see a branch off of, how best to address those. And like you said, let's kind of take it from the top here. We'll start with enrollment dynamics. You did mention with declining population, that of course is a concern. Not just for independent schools. Public schools are also dealing with this as well. It's just across the board. So as we look ahead to the future, what do you think are some of the most critical factors that you feel like will determine whether an independent school will be able to survive, thrive, and just go on existing amidst this decline in population and younger people who would be paying tuition?
Well, this is such an important area because it points right to financial sustainability of the school, and more importantly, where they're located. Whether it's Alabama, Georgia, Florida, it doesn't matter. Every state has areas that are more highly populated, less highly populated, rural areas, so forth there. But what's really necessary is to be able to have a study done of where is the population moving? Where is it going to be in 5 years and 10 years? For example, just had a study done in Georgia. We'll use that as an example. And what we found is that there were 5 areas in the state of Georgia that it could be broken down to. You had in the area around Atlanta, for example, you had South Georgia, Southeast Georgia, North and Northeast Georgia. And what we found in that state, for example, is that 3 of the areas, probably in the next 5 to 10 years to 15 years, are going to be okay because the population moving in, and even though we have a declining enrollment overall, those are the areas that are hotspots that are going to be increasing in total population, so that the family, even though the family size may be less, there's going to be population, and they're going to be pretty much okay. But if we look at South and Southeastern Georgia, for example, the population is declining and people are moving out. Now, what's really important for a head of school and a board to look at is not only do we have a lot of different and alternative methods of education coming up, and some of them are fantastic, some of them a little bit more challenging. Public schools are changing, but they need to look at where the people are coming in, what is going to be the share. For example, if you look at South Georgia and Southeast Georgia, The population probably is going to be, or the pool of students may be declining by even 10 to 15% over the next 10 to 15 years. Now, you use that as an example, and the schools, none of them are going to continue to be able to exist because they're competing for those students. And as the pool gets less and less, either you've got to adjust your financial model so that perhaps not having two classes of each particular grade level, maybe moving down to one or four to three, whatever the model is. Then you're looking at, okay, our facilities may or may not be adequate or maybe too much. We may not be able to support it all. But what is really important is knowing what the population is going to be so that you can model your financial analysis around what you anticipate is going to be your population in the next 5 to 10 years. And we have to look at that for not only the facilities, but teachers. What is going to be the dynamic as far as how much it's going to cost to have qualified teachers. You got more competition in let's just say the Atlanta area. So you're hoping that your population is going to be able to increase and your enrollment is going to be able to stay the same or increase naturally. But these are factors that we have to look at. So you look at Alabama, and it's the same dynamic. You're going to have areas that are going to be changing as far as the number of students that are going to be available. And then that just trickles down in all of the financial sustainability of the school, and everything is affected. So that is a general overview on where we really need to look at what is going to be happening in the next 5 to 10 years.
Is it something where, because you mentioned that you need to look and see where the trends are, as far as your population, as we're talking about enrollment here specifically, and you're having to kind of map out, what's going on around me, what's going on around the walls of the school. Is it something where it can sometimes end up being maybe an educated guess as to what's going on, or are there ways that schools can really make sure that they have a good understanding of where the population or their target audience perhaps might be in the next 5 to 10 years? What does that process look like as far as making sure that they can feel confident that they have that right information, that good data to then use as they make these other important decisions, as far as enrollment and then other areas as well?
You just mentioned it. Everything should be data driven. Educational or our best guesses, we're going to have some sense of that. But really, we need to be guided by facts. We need to be guided by trends. We need to be guided by the data. So having an analysis and making sure that we're seeing, because again, what is going to change in the next 5 years? Is manufacturing going to continue to come back to America? And if it is, where it's going to be a huge automotive plant, for example, in Alabama. Is something going to pop up that's going to give 15,000 jobs, 20,000 jobs to a particular area? Well, that's going to be known probably 5 years in advance, because it's going to take some time to build the facilities. So, that's going to be, so we need to look at not only, of course, the data, but we need to look at what's happening around the U.S. and around the jobs market and what's driving people to particular areas. So, but everything should be data driven. If that helps,
absolutely
on it there.
Yeah, and you brought it up a moment ago, and I think it's a good transition, I think, here into financial sustainability, because obviously your enrollment will, obviously play a huge impact in, the amount of money that's being brought into a school. What are some of the challenges that you see right now as it pertains to financial sustainability for independent schools? I know tuition is a big one, but there's a lot of other revenue that schools can generate. A big one, of course, is fundraising, which you've had a lot of experience with, as well as Lighthouse Counsel. What are some of the things that people need to be looking at, aside from maybe just adjusting their tuition based on enrollment and all those things that we talked about already? What are some other things that they can do to make sure that they put themselves in the best possible position, at the end of the day when it comes to dollars and cents?
There are some areas, and of course, you mentioned the tuition, and I will just suggest that the tuition nowadays in independent schools is often higher than colleges and universities, and that affects obviously who can attend your school, which also goes into the aspect of perhaps vouchers. Yeah, there's many states that have programs tax-free programs that will and help increase not only endowments but bringing students in and make it more affordable to because of course that will diversify your population and bring in so much benefits with culture and so forth there. But so the tuition, while that is obviously extremely important, there are ways to focus on that's going to help out the school. And again, perhaps a lack of scholarships. With schools that don't particularly need scholarships or so forth. That's awesome, but at the same time, it doesn't at times help to diversify the population itself and give a little broader life view there. Some of the other areas really that they need to look at, and of course, this is the board and the head of school, annual operations, annual funds. We've done a lot of course, we've done a lot of financial analysis on schools over the years. I've found that if I come in and look at the financials of a school, usually it can be adjusted to increase the net profit, even though they're nonprofits. It's still your net. You can increase your net profit by probably 5 to 8% by having somebody come in and look at the financial and do a financial analysis to really pinpoint some of the areas that you may be struggling with. Are you capitalizing on your endowments? Are you capitalizing on your annual fund? Do you have the relationship? And of course, everything that we're really talking about revolves around relationship building and trust, because donor base nationwide is getting smaller. And so we have to look at if we have a diminishing donor base, then it's more important than ever to make sure that we're building the trust and relationship with those donors to give financial stability to the school. That involves capital projects. And again, the capital projects goes back to also making sure that we know who's going to be our population, what is going to be our population 5 to 10 years. We don't want to overbuild, but if we are growing and we have 3 classes per grade level, but we have more students than applying, and we may be able to fill up half of a 4th classroom, well, that's fine. If we're looking at it in 2nd and 3rd grade, just for example, that we need another classroom in that. Well, that's fine. But as we have a diminishing population, if we increase our capital expenditure on facilities and we add those classrooms, add the teachers, add everything that it takes to do that, and then all of a sudden in a few years we have a diminishing population, then all of a sudden we're running into a problem with financial stability. So it's really important to look at your annual operations, your annual fund, and developing and really maximizing the buy-in for our schools and for our faculty and staff, and make sure that the annual fund is supporting all the things that we want to give our kids. We want to give them the extras, and besides just the classroom experience there. Endowments, huge. And again, as I mentioned, the capital projects. So those are some of the areas that really have to be consistently looked at to make sure that the finances are in order, and that going forward we are on the right track where we need to be as far as and again that we also have in school teaching and online teaching. There's so many different areas to look at now with alternatives. All those play into that financial analysis and the sustainability of the school.
Mhm. And I know that for some of our member schools, it's a head of school, and then it's a handful of folks that are going to be on the board for that school. What is maybe that moment that either the head or board members can experience where they can look at whatever it is that they're looking at as it pertains to finances and think, you know what, I might need some help here with some of this. What are some of those things? Red flags, maybe, I guess. What are some of those warning signs? Maybe some of those things that maybe leadership needs to keep in the back of their mind that can be indicators of, hey, maybe we need a third party to come in and take a look at this. Maybe we're missing something. And then what that, ends up being for them, like how your work specifically can then come in and really turn the ship around. How have you seen this work in the past?
Many times it sounds kind of funny or odd in a sense, but what is the focus of your board meetings? If the focus of the board meetings are what's on, we're having a lot of issues with what's on the lunch. We're having if the board meetings are delving into more of the daily operations, focus is challenged. Because they're not looking at the big picture. They're not looking at their roles in the separation. The head of school has so much to do as on a daily basis, but some of the red flags need to be if the board is not focused on strategic planning, on financial sustainability, but more so focusing on what's happening in the fourth grade, what's happening in whether they have a PTA or whether they have sports, and most will have it there. But if they're getting into more of the day-to-day operations, that's a red flag. Because in our work, we go in and do a lot of board development, helping them to define the roles. You will always have leaders in the board in the school. Who is the leader? The leader should be the head of school. You need a strong leader. But often you'll see boards will hire a head of school that is not so much a leader because they don't want somebody that's strong. They want somebody that they can kind of mold in their way, which is a red flag because what's happening then many times is that they're looking to control the school and control those day-to-day operations. So who is really the leader? Is it the board chair? Is it somebody on the board? Is it a parent? Is it a donor? Those when you look at who is driving the ship, that's a big it can be a red flag or it can be a real good sign that they're on track. If the head of school is leading the role and leading the board, then it's a good thing. But if the board chair and the head have a great relationship and the board is in their lane and focusing on financial sustainability and the strategic planning and where the school is going in the future and policy procedure, then that's where it should be. That's the biggest red flag. If you have the faculty and staff kind of running the ship in, and if they are dictating kind of more to the board or to board members what they want to have done inside the school, that's a red flag. Not that their input is not valuable, because it is valuable. And the faculty and staff, the faculty in particular, they are in tune with the population, with the parents. They are there every day. And so you need their input. You need everything that they bring to the table, which is absolutely fantastic. But at the same time, that doesn't need to drive the decisions of what's happening in the school. So there are some red flags that can come at who's driving the ship and where decision being made. That's the biggest thing. And again, us coming in and doing strategic planning, board development, everybody, and I've served on many boards. I've been the chair of many nonprofit boards. And it's always a good idea to have an outside firm come in to help out with board development, because again, we get we get focused on what's happening in our particular field, well, in our area, and just some of the insights that can be brought in from the outside are just things that forgot about, didn't know about,
Yeah.
or hey, that's a wonderful thought there. And it's not that expensive, but the insight that's gained is
Hmm.
invaluable.
Hmm. Yeah, no, there's a lot that can be that can be gained for sure. Absolutely. And I wonder too, there are, when you're making a decision this big and when there are, board members and you have a head of school that are trying to work together in a positive way, sometimes there can be disagreements about the best path forward, whether
Mhm.
that's big picture or on day-to-day operations. What are some of the ways that maybe in your experience you've seen uh, you know, these two sides, or even it can be, parents, teachers getting involved into these discussions as well. How do you make sure that that conversation moves forward in a positive way, even in light of disagreements and maybe even deep disagreements over how to best proceed?
You need disagreements. You need to have an open environment where there's trust, respect. Respect is everything.
Hmm.
Because if somebody is uncomfortable with sharing what they really feel, then it's not healthy. Then we need people to be very respectful in what their thought process is, and we don't need at times. And so we don't need an idea without a solution or without an attempt for a solution. So, we can come in, for example, and do within the strategic planning focus groups that involve the stakeholders across the board, faculty, staff, parents, donors. So you're getting the insights from everybody, but it's in an environment that is controlled and then put together in a form to where it can be a healthy discussion between the board and the head of school on here's what everybody is saying, here's what the consensus is, and here's the areas that we feel then that we need to focus on to continue to have the school grow effectively and efficiently and with everybody on board. It's not disregarding any ideas, but it's more prioritizing. And it's very difficult at times to do that internally because we have so many things going on in within a school, and we don't. It's easier to speak to somebody outside because again, you don't feel like we're encouraging it. Yeah, we're encouraging all ideas. What's the thoughts? What's everything that we're bringing together into a focus group or into a particular meeting, so that we can put an analysis together and then where should we go? How should that strategic plan be developed, which is what we do, obviously, and then be able to be checked off as they go along by each year, by each board meetings, and we know where our goal is, we know where we want to be, and then we've got the roadmap in order to get there.
Uh-huh.
So that's hopefully that sheds some light on some of the red flags and some of
It
the areas
does.
that they and it's very difficult to bring these ideas in sometimes, or bring counsel in from the outside to organizations, because they want control,
Hmm.
and they don't want it to change because this is how it was. We went to school here, and this is how we like it. This is our comfort
Hmm.
zone. Um, but change can be good if it's constructive change.
Hmm.
But it's always good to analyze uh, every aspect of the school each year in order to make sure that we're on track.
Yeah, on track, and as best you can, of course, staying true to your school's mission and its values, while also making the necessary room for growth and change and sustainability, which of course is going to be the main goal there. Um, One part of
Yes.
all this that is really difficult, I think, for people to kind of keep tabs on. I know even for myself, it can be difficult. Is legislative and policy changes. This is another one of the big challenges facing schools right now. You mentioned school vouchers previously as a form of funding that schools can look at. That's if correct me if I'm wrong here, but school choice and vouchers, I believe, are in effect in Georgia. They're in the process of being rolled out here in Alabama with the Choose Act, which is a big conversation that's ongoing among our member schools. And then beyond the state level of government, you have changes at the federal level as well, with all sorts of things that you can hear in the news, or things you saw on Facebook, somebody saying this or that about a current event, relating to the Department of Education. Massive changes happening there. What are some of the things that you foresee in the next year or so that could really, at either the state or the federal level, that you could see really impacting the future of independent education as we see it right now?
The school choice and vouchers probably one of the biggest ones there, obviously. I was head of school in Georgia for years, and so we had, of course, the tax advantage funding, and there's also some more models that are coming out, voucher programs that are also coming out to give that school a choice. That has been a lifesaver for schools, and I say for schools, I'm really talking about students, because everything that we should do, as you said, should be based on our mission of our school. Every decision that should be made or that needs to be made needs to be focused on how does it benefit the students, period. It's all about the students. So I see the necessity of, with the independent schools, the cost of the tuitions rising so much to where it's out of reach for many people. At times, the majority of the people, it needs to be brought in. But then they may be in failing school systems, and that's just so detrimental to individual students who have the capacity to just excel, but they don't have the tools or the environment to excel in. And so the vouchers, school choice programs are really helping a lot to where you can still have the financial sustainability of the school because you're getting tuition dollars. It's just coming from a different pot. And you're allowing students to come in who have the opportunity of a lifetime that is now presented to them because it can be affordable to them. And with that being said, I'm a firm believer that everybody needs to have skin in the game. So even if there are school choice and vouchers, parents really need to be involved in tuition to the best of their ability, because they're paying, they are involved. And they have skin in the game. But things are changing federally. The Department of Education. Okay, how are things going to play out? We don't know. We do know that the important parts of what's happening in education and from a federal level is going to remain. Programs, for in my doctoral studies, it was on differentiated learning, organizational structure, but differentiated learning was my main focus. And in order to make sure that students with certain special needs are met, there's many programs coming in federally and state. Many times it's mostly state, but those need to be continued and will be continued to make sure that everybody has what they need to succeed. And how do they learn best? And what are the programs that are going to be implemented in order for them to study best and to learn best? So on a federal level, we need to be able to watch. But again, here's the real struggle as a head of school. It's a 24-hour job, 7 days a week, and you're just trying to keep up with the school and the population. So knowing what's going on legislative, that comes in from your organization, any of the state organizations, the GISA, Georgia Independent School Association. The involvement with the state legislature has to be given to the schools and given to the heads and to the boards to know what is going on. And then now we have an even increased focus on the federal level, what's going on. And all of those things, it's a little easier at times to have an outside counsel come in because they're able to focus on these things and bring them up in a healthy way so that they know it's now on the radar. So some of the advantages and areas to look at and to keep tabs on in the future here.
Yeah, the AISA especially has been working very hard these past couple of years, and will continue to work into the future as well in advocating for our members in the Alabama state legislature.
Mhm.
And it is important work, and it's important that we also continue to see our member schools, like you said, board members, heads of school that are also advocating to their local representatives, and letting them know what they need and what they would like to see as it pertains to some of these policies that do affect independent schools. So I wanted to make that point as well. And yeah, it can be difficult to keep tabs on everything. So would you say it's maybe more of a task that maybe falls at the feet of the board, would you say, when it comes to keeping an eye on all of these changes that can impact kind of the sustainability and the future of a school?
It would be nice to say that. In theory, that would be yes, that would be the way to go. But it doesn't happen. And I say that everybody's got their best intent. I mean, their hearts are. If they're serving on the board, most of the time, their hearts are right. It's not for a particular agenda. I mean, we all have agendas. Everybody is on a board or everybody is involved because of something. Now, that agenda can be good, and it can be true altruistic, but at the same time, it may be focused. People on the board, just for example, they have their jobs, they have their families, they have everything else going on, and they're not as focused on what's going on legislative as far as schools and so forth. There, heads of schools are a lot more involved because obviously we're seeing faculty and staff get involved because they're hearing it. So it should not, but that needs to be focused on the board level, but the board most of the time is not going to be bringing it up because they're unaware of what they're unaware of. Normally, it's going to be brought in by the head of school from conversations with yourselves, with us, and knowing here's what we didn't know. Here's what we need to also be aware of and have on our radar so that we can make sure that the school focusing on what it needs to be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road.
Okay.
So that's kind of the dynamic and how it happens.
Mhm. I wanted to also talk about one of these other challenges that schools are going to be facing, I believe, in the upcoming year is technological integration. Is something that is I feel like as we go down this list, a lot of these are just like, oh my goodness, these are insurmountable challenges. But this is something that schools are facing. Being able to bring in technology that enhances learning, that does not, but at the same time does not handicap learning, and then finding ways to afford it, finding ways to make it the best it can possibly be, and not because it's just cool to have computers in your classroom, but because the workforce of tomorrow will rely heavily on their computer skills, and how that's evolving over the next few years, I think is going to be incredible to see and watch. What are some of the things that you foresee as being real challenges in this area for schools?
One of the big challenges is shutting the computer and turning the phones off so critical thinking can happen. And so you have conversations in the classrooms with students and allowing them to think for themselves and think without a program telling them. And that's not minimizing the tremendous advantages that we have using AI, using the tools that we can from computers and from programs. I mean, that's invaluable, and what we have at our fingertips these days is just incredible. But at the same time, if we're not developing students that are really understanding critical thinking methodologies, then their contributions later in life in the workforce is going to be minimized or diminished. And so, making sure there's that happy balance between what we learn, how we learn it, but then having the conversations. Social media, as we know, it's All too often, it's a little bit easier for our younger population, older population also, but more so our younger population, to text even when they're sitting next to someone instead of looking at them and speaking to them and looking in their eyes and talking to them. That's one of the biggest challenges that I see. As a head of school and a teacher, I mean, I was in the classrooms, and it's very difficult to really break that. Um, I'll call it habit, or that crutch of your phone, of using social media to actually communicate. We have our world is changing, as we know. If you're going to be an accountant, it's fantastic, but accounting can be a program, and so the jobs are going to be minimized as far as necessity, because you have software that can handle it there. But a creative mind that is an accountant, that creativity is not there yet in the programs or in AI. Now, general AI, then that'll change things, but we need to bring out the creativity in the students, because when we have the creative thoughts, that can be implemented in every discipline, and those individuals are so valuable because they bring in a totally different viewpoint and to jobs, to so forth there. So helping students understand that and helping inside the classrooms, that's one of the biggest things. Where's that balance?
Yeah.
And how do we utilize it without, and again, when all of the work and research that I've done over the years, I needed a guide. If a teacher or professor told me to write something, told me to do something, I'd struggle for a long time to figure out, how do I do this? What's kind of the format? But if they gave me some examples, here are some of the great writings. Read this and then put it in your own words and figure out how to emulate what they're saying and how they said it into what you want to say. And so, that's a huge advantage of advantage to help students understand how to use technology, how to use what we have at our fingertips to improve their own thought process and understand how to really increase what they can bring to the table, and research and words and all the writings and the thoughts that they can bring. That's where an integration has to happen, and that's a focus.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's perfectly stated. And I don't even have anything to add to that, because I think that's really important. Like you said, for them to understand that the reasoning that goes into it is more important than just getting the answer quickly. And obviously automating some mundane tasks will save you time, but you need to make sure that you understand what's going on, as you put something through like an AI program, and then best understanding how that pertains to your overall goals. So workforce challenges was something that you brought up briefly a little bit ago. I know that, again, all of this kind of, it feels, ties back to money, and and that is a big part of it, of what how to retain and attract teachers, top talent. But there are other aspects to it as well. Work-life balance is something that gets thrown out a lot in these types of discussions. But what do you see as a big challenge and a big maybe solution to independent schools having the best educators that they can in the classroom?
The one of the biggest driving forces, money. Money is nice. Money comes and goes. We need to feed our families. We need to make sure that we have enough money to do the things that we need to give our family the benefits and so forth there, obviously. And that's going to drive many times, a teacher to our school or away from our school. But what we really need to help with is to make sure that we have an environment that is a trusting environment, that is a respectful environment, because people will give up money in order to be in an environment where they thrive, where their voices are heard, where they're respected, where they're trusted, and vice versa. And so building that relationship, when you look at any independent school, and since we obviously are talking about schools. When you look at any successful school and you go in there, what you see people, it's a family. It doesn't matter how big the organization is. It may be a thousand student school with 200 faculty and staff. But what you feel the family environment. You feel the belonging. You feel loved. You feel unconditional love. And unconditional love does not does not mean that you're not disciplined. You're not it's not a negative. It's brought about in a way to where you're moving forward by mentors, by people that you respect, and how things are presented to you. And it doesn't matter if it's the teacher or if it's a head of school from the board or however that it's the relationship building. And so when the relationships are healthy and structured in that way, that will help to retain the best faculty and staff. And also, that'll drive people there because when you have an environment such as that, as I speak about, then though that faculty and staff is going to go tell their friends and who are frustrated at their workplace, whether it's a public school, private school, it doesn't matter. If they're frustrated with what they have to do or it's not a healthy environment, then they will come to your school and they will and I don't mean this to minimize the wages, but they will take less wages in order to be in that environment. And so it all revolves around trust and respect of everybody in that organization.
And I also feel like too, teachers want to know that they're making a difference, that the work that they're putting into it, the long hours, is making a difference in the lives of their students, not just academically, but then on a personal level, that holistic development is happening in that student. And like you said, I think that a big way to making sure that impact is being made is by making sure that the teachers have their structure, have that environment that can set them up for success in that goal of really developing the child, the student. What are some other ways maybe? Because I know that you said with money not being the top factor, maybe because I don't know of many teachers that say, yeah, I got into teaching because of the 6-figure salary. They're getting into it because they have a passion for it and they have a love for it. I guess maybe for schools that have teachers that maybe they're looking at it right now and they're like, man, this teacher came in and there was so much life and energy, and it just feels like now they're kind of just stuck in the mundane and there isn't that vibrance or that energy that they brought in. What can I as a school leader do to kind of help reinvigorate that? What is the first step for that in your mind, do you think?
It goes back to one of the initial conversations that I shared, and that is who's leading the ship, who's driving it. In the faculty and staff, for example, who are the leaders in the faculty? Is it you can have a teacher that's been there 20 years, and they could have taught first grade 20 years. Did they teach 20 years 1 year at a time, the same thing, or did they teach 20 years differently every year? That's two different mentalities. That's two different philosophies, and so you have at times kind of the old guard. I'll use that for lack of better words. You have the old guard that want to protect how it's been and how we've done it, and as new teachers come in, they kind of put them that whoever's driving it in the faculty staff, who's the leaders in the faculty and staff, who really is the leader. They may not be said, but everybody knows that that person is who you listen to, good or bad. And if a new faculty member comes in with great ideas and all this vigor and just excitement and doing things the right way, and then you have the old guard come in and say, let me share some insight with you. This is how we hear, and it stifles it. So really, we need to look in the schools at who are and bring in the leaders who are more. They work as a team, and they want those discussions. They want the people. You want a healthy environment to where there's a balance between the old and the new, for lack of better words, and the new people coming in bringing ideas that are not kind of depressed or suppressed, but really brought to light. And that happens in groups. That happens in not so much in faculty meetings because you've got large groups, but in more focused groups where you have teachers from all grade levels working together and in sharing some of the struggles, the positive things. And when the voices are heard and the ideas are heard and they're shared, I would rather have everybody just brainstorm, bring all the ideas together. We can decide what's best based on our mission of the school and where we need to go. But if we don't have the ideas, we don't know what we're missing. And so we need the healthy discussions, and it needs to be an open environment that fosters that. In so many schools, it's not said, but it's known. Don't bring it up. Those are some of the things, some of the challenges and you'll see with healthy schools that are vibrant, you have a lot of teamwork, a lot of encouragement.
Yeah, open sharing of ideas. And it's like you said, it all comes back to relationships, you know?
Always does. And who's driving the ship in each area. And that is what's most important. And you've got to have a strong board in order to make sure, and a strong head of school to make sure that the changes as they're happening or need to happen are done in a healthy way that doesn't disrupt the entire school or doesn't disrupt the particular donors or whoever really is in charge that will stamp it out immediately there. It can be a very tough process, but it's outside counsel really coming in helps to kind of foster that relationship and build it. And because internally it can be very, very difficult.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as we talk about bringing in some of these new ideas and making sure that you're keeping an open mind from a leadership perspective about how best to run things and how best to be effective for the students, which of course is the main goal here. Professional development is a big aspect of this. And it's something that I think everyone would agree again is, yeah, professional development, it's important. I'm all for it. But actually getting down to it and actually getting the money set aside for it, the time even more so is probably even more valuable resource to have to put aside for this. What practices or strategies, I guess, have you seen that work well in making professional development a priority, but a priority that also doesn't take away from the day-to-day operations of a school?
And that's always a challenge because the ideas of professional development, all too often, whether it's done online, for example, there's many programs that now professional development done online, obviously, and it's invaluable to be able to do it time wise and so forth. So great, but are they really listening? Yeah, you put your computer on, you can have the professional development at home. On a teacher workday or whatever it is, or whenever it is. But if it's not isolated, then all the other noise is getting in the way of the learning. That's one of the struggles when we're in house. When you go to a particular forum or seminar in order to have the professional development, it is a more controlled atmosphere and you're focused on it there. So the learning does happen many times best in that kind of environment. But there's also times when that's not feasible. So you've got to do the best thing and make sure that you're getting you're giving the opportunity to have it, but at the same time, what is the best way to implement it there? And the other thing about it is when you have that professional development, we all have our love, we all have our desires in kind of the area of focus that we like to focus on. Fortunately, it's the other areas that we need the help with, and that may not be our desire. So what I would do many times is I would find out what the teachers, what their area of love or learning or how they taught, what really drove them, what was exciting to them. And then I would have them research that as much as possible. We bring in other teachers, however, other schools, do the research and bring in the data on that particular focus, and then have them help all of the others in that particular area, so that you had somebody with passion and a desire leading that particular area that you're trying to help the other teachers develop and listen to. That goes back to the trust and respect. When we have trust and respect in our fellow coworkers and the leadership of the school, then we're going to respect what they did. We're going to respect what they researched, and we're going to listen to it. So, one person can't do it all, and you can't teach everybody in all of the professional learning seminars that are out there. But you can have each one focus on an area, and then share with others and bring it together. And then all of a sudden, it everybody gets it, and that's a much easier way to do it, and you get a lot of buy-in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and then you also have the added advantage too of you're not having, perhaps a speaker who may not necessarily be familiar with you on a personal level or your school on a personal level, but you are able to have that teacher kind of come back and kind of be the filter that then takes, what they heard from this professional development and then personalize it, make it, that much more applicable to their colleagues, their fellow teachers in a way that makes sense for them, because what might work obviously for one school or one teacher might not work for the best for the other. So that's definitely something to kind of keep in mind. And on the topic of professional development, I'll go ahead and throw in our shameless plug here. The AISA here coming up in just a few months is getting ready for our 2025 AISA Leadership Conference down in beautiful Orange Beach, Alabama. And this is a fantastic professional development experience that I want to make sure that our members are aware of. I'll have a link for registration and all the information down below. I won't, get into all the nitty gritty of that, but you, Roy, and your colleague Jeff Jowdy over there at Lighthouse Counsel will be talking about some of these things, but also, a lot of other angles to this, and as it pertains to strategic planning and best practices in school leadership that I think will be deeply impactful for our member schools, and there will of course be many other speakers that will kind of have a little bit of something for everybody. So definitely go check that out. But professional development, of course, again, such a key aspect of education and making sure that we're staying on top of these developments and not relying on ourselves to try and do all the research, but understanding that maybe it's best to have that third party either come in or go to that third party who it is their job to follow these things and make sure that they are getting the best information and that they can, disseminate that information in a way that makes sense. Because a lot of times the news does not make sense. Things, policies don't make sense, but maybe somebody can come in and kind of explain it in a little bit better way. But,
well, Michael, I might that every time that I've gone and perhaps I didn't particularly want to, but every time I went to a seminar or any environment, learning environment, I may have been hesitant to go in, but I've always walked out with something that I either knew or forgot. Or I walked out with, what a great idea. So we can always glean something. And if it's one idea that can change a student, it's worth it.
Yeah. Well, and also too, one of the most powerful aspects or advantages of membership in an association like the AISA is that you have other people who are in a similar boat as you, who have the same questions as you, who have similar experiences, or maybe alternatively, they have found a good solution to the problem that you have. And so as you come together, you have all of these like minds who, yes, are gaining information from, a speaker, a presentation, and that's fantastic. And there is that learning and development. But sometimes, man, just being shoulder to shoulder with people who are in the trenches, just like you, can really be not just informative, as in, hey, you're dealing with the same issue that I am. Oh yeah, this worked for us. Oh, we'll give that a try. But I also think for morale also, I mean, it can be a very tiring and draining job at times to be a teacher or a leader in a school. And I think that's one of the big things that I think people will glean from this and other professional development opportunities, of course, is just understanding that you're not alone in what you're doing.
Lighthouse Counsel, we just did a survey for the Georgia Independent School Association
Yeah.
with it's about professional development and about all of this. The number one in annual conferences, the number one thing that everybody wanted was to be able to network, to be able to have that relationship with their fellow colleagues that they just don't have the chance to otherwise. So getting together and being able to share the ideas, that was the number one item. Being able to network and share professional development ideas. That was their main focus. Now, lots of other things,
Yeah.
but we heard that repeatedly, and so that really drives it home the value of the organizations like yours, like there in every state organization that it focused on it in professional development, helping them to gain that networking opportunity is invaluable.
Mhm. There were two other challenges I want to talk about. The head of school and board relationships, we've kind of already touched on that, so I'll kind of move past that. And lastly, I wanted to focus on community engagement, which is kind of something that, it's a word that gets thrown around a lot. And again, it's one of those things that, yeah, we're all for that. But what does that look like? Community engagement, and that can be just obviously the physical location that you're in. But also there's also the aspect of, alumni and donor relationships as well. How can schools make sure that they're putting their best foot forward in this way as well?
One of the biggest things to concern ourselves with is making sure that we're transparent as an organization. We don't want to air our dirty laundry, but at the same time, we want to be real. We want to make sure that our stakeholders are keenly aware of what's going on, of what's happening within the school, within the organization, to make sure that the community knows that we're there for them. Of course, schools will have community work days to where they're out in the community working. Well, I'll take it a step further, and I'll just use my my family. One of my daughters as an example, and she was out of high school at the time, working her way through college. In our hometown where we had moved from, and where she was grew up, and I had a call from a friend of ours, and that friend said, I saw your daughter. She was working at local UPS store. And she said she didn't recognize me at first, but I watched her when I walked in, and she was as respectful and kind as I could ever have asked for. She was just, and this was to everybody there. And I wanted to call you and just tell you that. As a parent, that warmed my heart because, we try to instill the values in our children. And what's most important is when we're not there, that those values come forth. And that's what we need to do in our schools. We need to have when our students are out in the community, they represent our school, but more importantly, they represent the morals and values that we want them to make sure they're really instilling in others. And so, making sure that we are developing those relationships and that it's important for the students, faculty, staff, everybody represents our school. And they're outside of the school, they're still representing our school. And that filters out to our donors, to the community. So making sure that we have a roadmap and instill that within all of our stakeholders and students, constituents there, that this is who we are. We care about others before self, and that we care about our community, and we foster in that way. And that's kind of a bigger picture goal, but that's really where we want to be. Now, how do we implement that in the school? By having the respect, from the students to the faculty and staff, and the faculty and staff respecting the students. And when that starts happening, and when that's genuine, and from the parents, then all of a sudden it spreads to the community, and that becomes who we are. And that's how we develop community, because when we have that, when stakeholders, when donors know that that is those are who we are sending out in the world after they graduate, then they know that the world is it's going to be a better place because of those
Mhm.
students, and they want to spend their money where it's spent wisely, and they will invest in the school.
Yeah.
It's kind of a summary on one area there.
Yeah, and they want to feel like they're a part of that positive impact in the world. I know that
Okay.
that's going to be very important. Let's kind of zoom out a bit as we kind of bring a kind of a wrap to this whole conversation here. Is we've talked a lot about all these different challenges, but but again, probably speaking in a little bit more broad terms here, what do you see as maybe the greatest opportunity for independent schools right now, looking ahead to the next 5, 10, 15 years? What are some things that you're excited about as it pertains to these schools, and how can schools and leaders position themselves for growth and continued success in the best way possible?
Um, I'm 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 sad to say this, but if you look at where our student population as a whole in the U.S. is right now compared to the world, it's not good. I'm not talking about independent schools, because the students in independent schools are doing phenomenal. But if you look at our public schools right now, and what has happened to the learning, and how far we are behind so many other countries, that is the biggest opportunity. Yes, students will be driven to our schools when they know we are the best, and that we're helping the students become the best who they can be, who have the morals, the values, the critical thinking skills, and the care, and the purpose in life to make this a better place than when they began. A friend of mine always says, whatever we do, wherever we're at, we need to make the wood pile a little bigger than when we first got here. That's what we need to do with our students
Hmm.
in our schools. And that is the biggest opportunity that we have. And that is what's happening outside of our private schools, our independent schools, in the public school atmosphere and so forth there. And I'm not trying to criticize anybody. There's great individuals and great schools all around. But that's the biggest opportunity to drive students to our place, is when they know that we are developing students to be the best that they can be. It's the
Hmm.
biggest opportunity out there. And when we don't worry about the money and so forth there, but we focus on the mission and
Hmm.
the vision, then everything else comes in line.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like especially nowadays, you're right. There is such a focus on education and the development of early, like the early development years, and all the way through adolescence and through college, and I think that is something that everyone agrees is important and needs to be handled with care and intentionality. But I think it's going to be even more so over the next few years. I completely agree with you. The need and the desire and the demand for a high quality education, but also one that comes with the community, the athletic opportunities, the growth opportunities that an independent school can provide, I think will be that much more attractive in the years to come. So,
Yeah,
um,
and I'll add to that, Michael. It's so important to help our students understand that we need to listen to those who disagree with us, and have
yeah,
the respect, so then we can have a conversation.
mhm,
And that's being lost these days.
yeah,
There's a
that open dialogue. Yeah.
Yeah, that open dialogue is being lost. And when we produce students who are respectful of others' opinions, and they can have the conversations in fact-based conversations, then all of a sudden they are invaluable to our society. And that's where the transparency and the trust and the community involvement becomes so important for us, because they'll come to our schools in order to
Mhm.
gain that.
Yeah. the problems of today seem to get a little bit smaller whenever you start working together with folks that you might not have thought that you could agree with, but then all of a sudden you find yourself agreeing with them. But yeah, no, Roy, thank you so much. I really do appreciate you coming on. I think there's a lot of great information here. Like I said, Lighthouse Counsel senior consultant Beth Sanders posted a video that kind of goes through some of these through these 8 challenges that are facing independent schools. And I definitely encourage our listeners to go check that out. I'll link it down in the description of the podcast, as well as Lighthouse Counsel itself, in case anybody is interested in the services that you guys have to offer that really can be game changers as it pertains to the life and success of a school. And of course, as well, we'll have some information down in the description about the AISA Leadership Conference coming up here in June. So, Roy, again, thank you so much for coming on. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Michael, thank you for having us. And I'll shamelessly plug that if people go to the Lighthouse Counsel LinkedIn page, all kinds of blogs, there's testimonies, there's videos that you really dig into can help people in their particular situation address some of the challenges and opportunities that they're needing and looking for there. So I certainly encourage that.
Absolutely. Good deal. All right, Roy, thank you again so much. I'll let you go.
Michael, have a great day now.
Campus Conversations is brought to you by the Alabama Independent School Association. If you want to learn more about the AISA, check out our website at aisaonline.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube. Thank you so much for listening, and join us Tuesdays for the next episode of Campus Conversations.